and let us all do we can to build a better future.
Dr. Cornel West and, to another extent, RFK Jr. are being made into public enemies number one, right?
Yeah.
They are viewed in many ways as individuals that will disrupt the Biden campaign and help Donald Trump. I know. We got to bring up Trump, right? But look, Trump, he isn't the overall problem, okay? I get that Trump has said things that trigger people, okay? But look, when it comes time to cast your vote, you want to throw your vote to somebody that has earned your vote. Now, I'm not going to support Donald Trump, and I'm not going to support Joe Biden. Okay, I get it. There are people who watch our show who are Trump supporters. Okay, fine. That's it. The only thing I want to tell people is if you're voting Democrat or Republican, consider breaking away from the two-party system. And that's all I'm going to ask. Just consider it. If not, fine. Vote how you feel like. I'm going to vote independent. Right now, Dr. Cornel West has earned my support, right? But I also know that there's still a Democratic primary happening. And while I am not a fan of half the things RFK Jr. is saying, the smear tactics and censorship and villainy that's happening towards him is unwarranted by the Democratic Party, because we have seen reports. INN has covered this. RBN has covered this. Hardlands Media has covered it. Jimmy Dore's talked about it, how the Democratic Party weighs in on the Democratic primary. And corporate media is on the super fast rush to silence anyone that will say that Dr. Cornel West is a better vote, or dare I say it even further, that perhaps RFK Jr. is far more competent than Joe Biden. Now, again, I'm not participating in the Democratic primary, but the only reason why I bring up these attacks is because they're turning RFK Jr. into this quote unquote Republican that's running in the Democratic primary. But I've seen plenty of Democrats that act far more conservative, far more Republican than RFK Jr. All right. Now, he has said things that I don't agree with, but this villainy that we've seen by MSNBC and CNN is uncalled for. Same thing with the smear tactics towards Dr. Cornel West. These are ways to once again use fear tactics to make people who can't think critically to fall in line and vote for Biden. So before I pull up these videos from Case Study QB and this article from CNN, Colin, your thoughts on this overall rush and immediate blitzkrieg of corporate media vilifying Dr. West and to some extent as well RFK Jr. And I want to get your thoughts real quick.
I mean, we expected this, but it's interesting you bring it off RFK and like what. It's interesting that they're attacking him mostly for like his views on COVID, him like being a quack over that. Notice how they haven't mentioned anything regarding what he said about Israel.
True.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So
well, they actually have gone after him for supposedly being anti-Semitic, which I mean, I know the things that he said was really off-putting, but I won't say that is anti-Semitic, the words that he said.
No, it's not. No. It's not. And that's just a shield that a lot of people, like, the man's a Zionist through and through. But people don't use Zionists. And I think that's in of itself a problem. People are not calling out the real thing. It's the idea of Zionism that's a problem, but they hide behind and use anti-Semitism as more or less the cover. What he said was not necessarily anti-Semitic, but it was just more Zionist. That's the issue. And I talked about this on my show last week. Zionist equivocates to imperialism. So, but corporate media is in bed with the Israel lobby. So they're not going to attack him for that, because so that even with that, the fact that they haven't mentioned anything regarding that, where I know many people in independent media have, that should be a telltale sign for everybody that RFK, and like, look, I understand why people may like RFK, but for me growing up in like pretty much most of my adult life in Massachusetts, I don't think highly of the Kennedys, period. Like, do you really want another political dynasty running over this country? Like, no. So, like, especially with a Kennedy, like, he's not, and even with JFK, and I think people like, romanticize over, I think honestly too much over, like, he was okay, but he wasn't necessarily like a great president, really, given his history. Like, but I digress on all of that to say this is, the sky is blue, water's wet. This was to be expected, that anyone that is coming up against Biden is going to be smeared. And the idea, and I was watching what you were saying about Kyle, the fact that Kyle was saying, I don't think you played this part, but where he said, West would have a better shot of being president if he was running as a Democrat.
Oh, no, I played that for a previous segment. No, I did play that, and I was like, what are you talking about? They're going to do the same thing to him anyways. They're going to smear him, and they're going to censor him, and they're going to suppress him, and they're going to make sure he doesn't get on the ballot, and they're going to say he's going to be a spoiler.
Right. Because, and again, like they're saying, they're not so much because no one's really talking about Marianne really anymore now, but like initially they did the same thing to Marianne. And she's running as a Democrat. You don't think so? Just a lot. He was saying he was speaking out both sides of his mouth, but like I mean, that's all I really have to say on that. Is of course it's going to get smeared but I think it's what we really should be looking at is what they're saying as a smear. That I think. Is a lot more telling. It's not the idea of them being smeared, is what they're saying to smear. And, and I can make the argument for RFK in terms of, his views on COVID and everything else. Obviously, they want to deviate, from the corporate narrative about COVID. So it makes sense. With Dr. West, it's the idea of like they can't control him because he's running outside the duopoly and he has freedom to say whatever he wants. So that's what makes him a lot more of a threat because he's able to speak the truth. And they're scared of that.
So speaking of the truth, though, because here, let's actually pull this up here. I want to pull up just a retweet that Jimmy Dore did. If voting third party didn't matter, they wouldn't spend so much time trying to scare you away from doing it. If Cornel attracts enough votes to swing the election, then that's exactly the leverage that we want. If I were the Biden campaign, I would try to think of another solution to this problem besides voter shaming, scare tactics, and character assassination. Because in this article from CNN, Dr. Cornel West's candidacy on the Green Party line confuses some of his longtime political allies and friends, while also alarming top Democrats and black leaders as potential ticking time bomb for President Joe Biden in the next year's election. Again,
yes.
Well, look, I'm glad he's doing that. Go ahead, Colin. Go ahead.
No, I said this from the beginning. Like, I feel like Dr. West, in certain ways, is the perfect candidate for the Green Party. Like, he's popular, he's well known, he's generally well liked, he has the respect of the Black community in particular. So he's going to attract people. I think one thing, he's going to attract a lot of non-voters, especially in the Black community, which again, fuck off Kyle for saying that like Black people vote for Democrats because they're a trillion times better than Republicans. No, Black people vote out of duty and fear. And most of us don't vote anyway. So, but Dr. West is able to at least people who may not vote in the Black community some attention, which they're right. It can make the difference of whether Biden is going to lose the election. And Democrats say all the time, we hear this every election cycle, Black people save their asses. So, so the question is, Democrats and Republicans as well, what are you doing to attract the Black vote? What are you offering to us? And again, and I say this within the Black community because I don't think we're necessarily doing a good job of this, but we're not demanding what our needs are. I don't think we're demanding them effectively enough that we're able to kind of give the Democrats pause as to having the willingness to say, okay, you uncle, like, we'll give you what you want. I don't think within the Black community we've necessarily done a good job of communicating our tangibles in a more on a bigger stage. But
Yeah, and I want to pull up this here because here's what CNN's saying: tapping into Democrats' worries about Black voter turnout. While Biden has consistently registered strong support among Black voters, strategists looking ahead to 2024 are already worried about what those trends may mean for Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Michigan, and Wisconsin, all of which are critical to the president's reelection hopes. If Black voters don't show up for Biden in force, though there are fewer Black voters in Arizona, it is also a state with a long history of left-leaning voters going green, and where Biden edged out Trump by a little other than 13,000 votes. Sensing that the Black voter engagement will be a problem for them, the Congressional Black Caucus this week already launched a new PAC to fund a wider array of efforts to make the case in 2024. Davis said that will be part of the work he is looking into, citing Black unemployment at the lower rate on record, the high rate of creation for Black-owned businesses, and investments in local projects like bus rapid transit in Pittsburgh and new water lines. But wait a minute. Flint, Michigan still doesn't have clean drinking water. And the South and West Side neighborhoods of Chicago, there's still lead in our drinking water. So many communities are being polluted. Majority of them are, again, Black and Latino communities. When we also look at the fact of helping out small business owners, under the Obama-Biden administration, Black wealth went down aggressively.
Right. And they talk about unemployment at a low rate as a win. But how many of these jobs actually pay a living wage?
Exactly.
They never talk about that. And so, people are unemployed, but that might mean, and I think in many cases, that people are taking on more than one job in order to live.
Yeah.
Especially given that our federal minimum wage is still $7 an hour. I would argue even 15 in pretty much every state at this point. It's not going to be enough. We probably should be pushing for 20 to 25 at this point, honestly. Agreed. But they cite all of these things as a win. Not every Black person is going to run a business. Black people, I would just say generally, but I think especially Black people, they may have to take on more than one job in order to kind of make it. So these are the things that they don't talk about, that Democrats, when they had majorities in both houses 2 years ago, they could have given us a $15 million wage then, but the parliamentarians said no.
Exactly.
So it's all of this doesn't make sense if people are not feeling it in their pockets or seeing it in their communities that stuff is changing.
Exactly. I also want to, again, bring up this thing here as well, which is, again, spoiler anxiety. West still has secured the Green nomination, but he insists he will not be a spoiler next November. He disputed that Dr. Jill Stein, was when she ran on the Green Party in 2016 and won more votes than the margin of difference in several states, including Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. Glad that she did that, by the way, saying that those people otherwise wouldn't have voted at all. But Democrats remain traumatized. This is how weak, the Democratic Party is. They're traumatized from an election that took place way back in 2016 by that. And many still blame Stein, also accusing her of being a pawn of, hey, guess what? Everyone's favorite cartoon villain, Vladimir Putin, attack on the 2016 elections. Again, that was proven fake. Because again, in the election, it wasn't because Clinton lost because of Trump or the Russians. It was because she ran a terrible campaign. By virtue of her attendance at a state-owned Russia Today party in Moscow in 2015 and Russia troll farm activity boosting her campaign.
Now, and you know what? And I saw this on Twitter over the weekend. I think it kind of ran around that there's a picture of Hillary Clinton sitting next to Putin. But
oh no, is Hillary a Putin puppet?
Exactly. So it's just a lot of fear mongering and it's trying to make people scared into trying to vote, have people who are kind of weak-minded to vote in the way mostly in the Democratic realm. And so I'm glad they're scared,
Me too.
because maybe it will give them pause as to actually doing something tangible, especially for communities of color that are really meaningful. And if that happens, then essentially Dr. West has done his job, because he is forcing the Democrats to move to the left, on a lot of these issues. So I'm glad that they're scared, but I will say this, because I don't think this is talked about too much. We shouldn't rely on Dr. West either. Like, I know a lot of people are excited for the potential of him becoming president. He's not going to be president. Let's get that out there. What we can use him for, and I know that Dr. West has talked about this, is having people think about the possibility of having third party, Green Party, whatever, more of a viable option for people that feel very disenchanted with the duopoly right now. But I think also giving the idea of, kind of proving the point as far as when you have the right face who's actually able to speak truth, that will kind of bring people to the idea of, like, again, the possibility of thinking about third parties as an alternate version or alternate choice for them, especially if you choose not to just to sit home and not vote at all. So that's kind of what I'm seeing Dr. West having the capability of doing, not for him being president. Because I will admit, I do have some concerns about Dr. West, even in certain areas. But I appreciate the fact that he is scaring a lot of corporate media, especially within the Black community, because, he's going to get, at least he's going to get the interest of Black boomers. And I think especially younger Black people who are disenchanted with the duopoly. And I think the older Black boomer vote, because we know generally they love going to church, typically, and he speaks in that church speak. So it will be very attractive for a lot of those folks. And unfortunately, that will eat into the Democratic voting base, because they need those bases in particular. So if it forces them to kind of look in the mirror and actually think about, what can we do to actually ensure that we keep that community in the Democratic Party, then again, Dr. West has done his job, but I don't accept the fact that what they're saying is a win, for the Black community. Because as I say to people, like, I grew up just outside Newark, New Jersey. I go to my hometown. It looks the same as when I left for college back in the late 90s. Buildings are still run down. People are struggling still. If anything, I'll argue it's gotten a lot worse since I left. So that's what the reality for many people, especially in Black communities, of what they're seeing. And these are generally Democratic cities that are basically fucking over, my community. So if Democrats are not willing to have tangible things that people are able to see and feel and touch, that makes them feel that their lives are a lot better, they deserve to lose. And I welcome it. And if people have an issue with that, well, tough noogies, but, we got to look at the full picture in terms of how so many people have not felt cared for by the duopoly for my lifetime. And there needs to be serious conversations as to what can be improved.
I have to agree. I also want to pull up this video here. It's from Case Study QB, good friend of the show. He's been a huge treasure trove of information for our networks, for a lot of people on independent media. So please support Case Study QB, I guess, on X or Twitter, however which way you want to call it. But this is where, again, corporate media is going after RFK Jr. and saying that he's a Republican and should be running in the Republican primary. Because again, I find the vilification that's happening to West and RFK Jr. Look, I'm not surprised by it, but it's like, come up with something more creative than saying spoiler or they're secret Republican puppets or Putin puppets, because the fear tactics are getting old.
Go to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the other would-be president. Here he is. Well, actually, let's play his John F. Kennedy's grandson, Jack Schlossberg, speaking about RFK Jr.
He's trading in on Camelot, celebrity, conspiracy theories, and conflict for personal gain and fame. I've listened to him. I know him. I have no idea why anyone thinks he should be president. What I do know is his candidacy is an embarrassment.
Here's why they might say, this young man might be saying that. Here's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in his own words, captured by the New York Post.
COVID-19, there's an argument that it is ethnically targeted. COVID-19 attacks certain races disproportionately. COVID-19 is targeted to attack Caucasians and Black people. The people who are most immune are Ashkenazi Jews and Chinese. But we don't know whether it was deliberately targeted that or not.
David, he then denied he said that, but you saw it on.
No. Again, corporate media, I got to correct you. You guys spin it as him being anti-Semitic. He was giving his opinion about the pandemic that we were dealing with. Now, again, there are so many conflicting reports about what we went through in 2020 that we may never yet ever get a clear answer, as our lives were turned upside down and our own government abandoned us. But, they're using that. Before we play the rest of the video, Colin, your thoughts?
I mean, isn't this what I just said?
Exactly.
Like, I just said this. So, they're going to pigeonhole something. And again, even with that comment, I will admit, it was kind of problematic even for me.
Yeah.
But I understand the sentiment behind what he was saying, because, and I think actually he's kind of said something that I don't think people are not talking about too much. COVID did a lot of damage to the Black community. And I wish if RFK kind of used this stuff around COVID about the idea of talking about something like Medicare for all, or like,
I don't think that's going to happen. He's not going to talk about Medicare.
I would give him more. I will give him more credit if he was able to relate to something in what he's saying, to be like, this is why we need to focus on universal health care or a living wage or some. If he was able to make those connections, then I think it would be a lot harder for people to smear him. But because they are able to choose a lot of what he says in isolation and kind of make that the focus to make him look like a lunatic, he basically gave them a talking point that they can easily smear him for. It is not as easy to smear Dr. West because he gives a lot more context to what he says. He always ties it back to the working class. RFK doesn't necessarily do that. And so a lot of those attacks, corporate media, it's easier to target RFK because of stuff like this.
Agreed. I want to play one more minute of it. I know, I'm sorry to bombard you guys with BS DNC. I promise just one more minute, because again, they're saying that he's a Republican.
It's on tape.
Oh, he simply sounds like a Republican, which I think is the amazing kind of political analysis of this. We can qualitatively break down his comments and realize how absurd they are. But I honestly believe with conviction, if RFK Jr. was running in the Republican primary, he may be leading Ron DeSantis. It is exactly the type of Republican disruptor that party embraces. He speaks their language. I have no idea why he's running as a Democrat.
Okay, look.
He's part of the club.
He's part of the club. He says he wants to rebuild the Democratic Party that he remembers. RFK, look, it never existed. All right, bless your heart. But okay, fine. whatever. But you know, the Democratic Party is attached to his name. He's been a Democrat. He's not a Republican. He's been critical of Republicans, whatever. But again, the constant attacks, because I remember that Bernie Sanders was smeared before he cucked out. Again, not once but twice, people are saying, "Oh, he's a Putin puppet. He's a Republican stooge." They did that to Tulsi Gabbard in 2020. Anyone that was challenging the Democrats who were viewed as secret Republicans or third party or some sort of puppet to some foreign government. And again, this is happening to Dr. Cornel West. This is happening to RFK Jr. These two individuals, whether you like them or not, are not how they're being described by corporate media. All right. Dr. Cornel West has been consistent with his points, and RFK Jr., whether you like him or not either, he has his talking points and his perspectives and points of view. But neither of them are Republicans. Neither of them are spoilers, and they have legitimate reasons to run for the presidency in 2024. And look, they got a huge following. But what has Biden done for follow through for the rest of us? I mean, he is going to be campaigning inside his house, fundraising. That's it.
Right.
Not going to meet people.
According to Kyle, he's done a lot. So,
oh yeah, that student debt problem solved. Medicare for all solved. Trains derailing? No, they're always running on time. Jack. Again, this is the kind of thing that independent media has to deal with in regards towards watching this crap and trying to get the truth out, because so many people are susceptible to the corporate media brainwashing and believing like, oh yeah, Dr. West is a spoiler. Oh yeah, RFK Jr. is a Republican. None of this is true. They're just giving their opinions and basing them as facts when that's not journalism. Which is why, again, I will always find it hilarious that CNN article I read a few months ago, how the quote unquote journalist / talent at CNN, were upset that they had a town hall with Donald Trump that was being hosted by Catelyn Collins, who was trying to I guess do gotchas on Trump, which was never the case. I mean, again, it's just a constant smear tactic. So I'm going to give you the final word, Colin.
I mean, again, I think for both of them, but I think Dr. West does this a lot better than RFK does. They're both able to kind of center their talking points, even the most controversial ones, around the working class and their needs, they would do a lot better job in terms of, and I think we're seeing this with Dr. West already, how, he generally brings it back to the working class. Like, my concern is this community or these people. Every time he speaks, he always turns it back to the working class. And again, RFK doesn't necessarily do that. He talks a lot about these issues while true, but again, even in terms of COVID, and I had this conversation with somebody, I think it might have been Indy last week. We have people who are suffering from long COVID. Why not are we talking about the need? Well, anyway, but why aren't we talking about the need for universal healthcare for these people in particular, if COVID is really your issue? There's a lot that we still don't know about COVID that these people they have been forgotten about. No one's really talking about how long COVID is affecting people's lives. If you're making COVID your thing, bring it back to being the need for universal healthcare, which, by the way, sir, your uncle pushed when he was president, or at least he talked about it.
Right.
Look,
I want to hold out hope that maybe eventually, we do get somebody who will be powerful enough to fight for Medicare for all and not just wither away or submit to corporate media or two-party system. We do need to have a serious conversation about it. We need to not only have a serious conversation, it needs to be implemented to help alleviate many Americans out of poverty. Because again, when the leading cause of homelessness is, again, medical bankruptcy. It's just, I wanted 2024, even though we're still in 2023, to be an interesting election year. It's just the thing I find pathetic by the Democrats, at least at this point, and again, neither of us are surprised, is just that they're still hoping that their shite-fisted haymaker of, oh no, fear tactics, Trump, we got to stop him. They still think it works. And it's just pathetic that people still live in that bubble, and how people can be made afraid so easily.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And I was really disappointed in 2016 by a lot of people, and just how afraid they got about Trump. And it's like, you're letting this man live rent free in your head. This is Donald Trump we're talking about.
I think it makes sense that people feared Trump back then because we didn't know what he was capable of doing. We know what he's capable of doing now.
A whole big nothing.
So it means a whole lot of nothing for, I would argue, maybe about a third of the population, that if Trump was president again. Like, Trump can do a rally right now, and he's still going to get a lot of people who will wait in line for days, you know, just to hear him speak. No one's doing that for Biden, you know? So Trump is still very popular. And like, but as I say, I think especially on the left, it doesn't matter who's president because we're fucked by either party. So it really doesn't matter. And for me, it's just like, whether Trump or whether it's a Republican or a Democrat in office, I really don't care. Because at the end of the day, I'm still not going to get what I truly want in terms of actually having some radical change that I feel effectively in my life, or the lives of people who I work and live with in my community. And, you know, I think the fear tactics that they're trying to pull aren't going to work as well, given Trump, because we've experienced it already. So, and I would argue in a way, and I've said this, in a way, I would prefer it in a way, because people would be more attuned to what he does and will call him out appropriately, call him out for it. Nobody is really calling out Biden for the fuckery that he's doing in this country. Like, or they're making a justification like, oh, well, he didn't do what we wanted him to do, but at least he did this, you know.
Agreed.
You know, so it's just kind of like, you're giving him a low bar, especially when he had majorities in Congress for 2 years. He could have done a lot more with his power than what he did, but he chose not to. But you're giving him a cost because he did I wouldn't even call it less than the bare minimum.
Oh, you're being generous with that. He's done nothing. I'm sorry. Biden's done nothing for the American people. And this is why the Democrats are panicking. And folks, I'm going to encourage you just to break outside that brainwashed narrative and think for yourself. And look, I'm not going to tell you how to vote. If you want to vote for Trump, fine, vote for Trump. You want to vote for RFK Jr. during the primary, good luck in that fight, because the Democrats are going to rig it. Okay, that's what they're going to do. But all right, go ahead and do it. And if you want to vote independent, so be it. Hey, welcome to the club. And if you don't want to vote because you're burnt out by electoral politics, I am not going to blame you. But the one thing I will ask of all of you is don't fall for the propaganda, the smears, and the BS from corporate media.